This is a demonstration of the multi-criteria analysis tool that is built into Reportal. In this instance, I'm going to be using it to produce a vulnerability assessment for the city of Cape Town. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see here I've already got a multi-criteria analysis called COVID vulnerability. If I click on that and go into the configure option, this lets me configure them and run the multi-criteria analysis. So you can see I've given it a name, COVID vulnerability, and I am linking it to the small areas. So I would like to run the criteria against data that is at a small area level. So on this first tab, you'll see I've got 4 groups. I've got exposure risk, transmission risk, socioeconomic risk, and susceptibility risk. And I can weight those groups relative to each other using these sliders. I can add another group if I like, or I can remove a group. And for each group, I can then click on the tab, the associated tab. So on transmission risk, you will see the components that make up the group, the transmission risk group. So in transmission risk, I currently have an indicator with the population density from 2020. I've loaded that in as 2020 data, although it comes from census 2011. And I have another indicator for average household size. And these are calculated on a small area level and have been loaded into the database. Within this group, I can also set the weightings for each individual component so that it calculates the transmission risk based on the weightings that I give with these sliders. And I can also switch them from high levels being better off, contributing more, to low levels contributing more. Once I've set up all my components and groups, I can run the multi-criteria analysis, and this will take all of those calculations and all of the data. It will fetch the data out the database, and it will generate a score for each of the small areas. So as I zoom in here, you will see that it has drawn a map using the small area shapefile onto Google Maps, and it is coloring these small areas based on the score that I have given it, or the score that it has achieved. The score is also colored according to these settings at the top here. So low scores are colored red and high scores are colored red, so that doesn't really make sense. But what I have got is the opacity for low scores down at 0 and the opacity for high scores at 100. And that gives this effect where small areas that have scored low overall scores are kind of, they fade out into the background, whereas the higher scoring areas show up as a more consistent color, or a less opaque color. So if I wanted to change that, I could put the values as green to red and set the opacities both to 100. And when that calculates, you'll see that the shapes now are not, the small areas are not opaque, but they are rather colored from green to red. If I click on one of these shapes, so if I click on that very red square, it will open up this window, which shows me the ID for the small area that I've clicked on, plus the number of, or the different groups, the different multi-criteria analysis groups that I've got configured, and the elements or indicators that I have within each of them. So population density, the minimum and maximum value is from 0 to 1.18 billion. That would be people per square kilometer, I think. And so the range is 1.18 billion. Something probably more easier to grasp is the average household size, which ranges from 1 to 10. The value for this particular area is 4.6. So the 4.6 is about midway through that range of 9 points. So the score for that is about 0.4. It's got a weighting of 50. So that 50 times 0.4 gives me 20.12 plus the value for the population density. And using those different weightings of 50 and 100, I come out with a composite score of 22.37. These four groups add up to a total of 161, and depending on how that score rates or sits within the overall range of total scores for all small areas, it will color it from green to red, or based on the settings that I put in at the top. So this is how you would run a multi-criteria analysis tool. It's obviously not confined to being used in COVID-related instances, but it gives a nice spatial representation of your data, of your multi-criteria analysis, and it is very easy to use once you have the data loaded in from various data sources. Thank you.